Welcome to this week's edition of the Quality Heretic. I want to focus on one of my pet peeves this time, and that is quality manuals. Another area where companies way overthink the requirements here. Now, I'll acknowledge first, quality manuals are no longer required if you're ISO 9001 certified. They used to be, but they're no longer required. If you're in the med tech industry and you're doing ISO 1345, then they are still required. Either way, if you're doing 9001, I wouldn't get rid of your quality manual. It still serves a really important purpose because 9001 asks you to make sure that you have identified a number of things like context of the organization, and that there's a lot going on in there. And you go, well, how would I document that? Well, quality manual is a great place for that. But otherwise, I look at people's quality manuals, and if you think of your own company's quality manual, I always ask when I'm doing webinars or talking to my students at school, how big is your quality manual? And very commonly, they're 40 pages and up. And I go, okay, that's really interesting. Why? How many requirements are being met by your quality manual? The answer is four. Okay. There's only four things. A quality manual serves four purposes: to establish the scope of your quality system, in other words, what's in, what's out of scope, to document the procedures or reference them, so your SOPs, to develop or establish your process model, which shows how do all those processes and procedures connect, and to establish a documentation structure. And we all typically have that pyramid of four levels. You got the quality manual, SOPs, work instructions, and records. And another talk, I'll talk about why you're missing a layer if you only have four layers. But that's the four things: scope of your quality system, what procedures are documented, how are they connected, and what's your documentation hierarchy look like. Why would it take 40 pages? I've seen quality manuals that are 80 pages. The worst one I ever saw was 147 pages. Why would it take that many pages to address those four requirements? It shouldn't. The reality is it can be a very short document. I usually tell my students, because in one of my courses, we have them create, excuse me, a quality manual. And I tell them I'm going to be disappointed if their quality manual is anything more than 10 pages long. And the reality is, I think you could do it in six, five. And I've also done a version that's basically two-sided sheet of paper, or becomes a trifold brochure. And it meets all of the requirements and then some additional things that are value added for a quality manual. So I always challenge people, rethink that. If you're creating these 30, 40, 50, 60 page quality manuals, who do you think's reading them? Which then begs the question, who did you write it for? Probably you wrote it because it said something in the standard of the regulation, and you wanted to make sure that when the auditor asked, you can answer it, right? Here's our quality manual. Isn't it wonderful? Look how big it is, right? And the reality is those auditors are looking at you going, why is this thing so big? Okay, I've had that question. I came into a company one time and I just started with them and we had an audit the next week. And of course, first thing the auditor said, can I see your quality manual? And at the time it was 47 pages long. And I slid that across the table to him and he picked it up and held it in his hand like he was weighing it and said, how many requirements are you satisfying here? And I said, four. I'm going to work on that. Okay. And then when I redid it as this trifold brochure approach, the next time an auditor saw that, they came in, looked at that and said, finally. Okay. If you're assuming that the auditors want to see this big tome, right? Your version of War and Peace, that's not what they're expecting. They're looking at the requirements in the standard and going, have you met them? And there's only four. So rethink what's in your quality manual. And by the way, rethink who your quality manual is for. It is not for the auditor. You've often heard me talk about not thinking in terms of audit readiness because that's not what you're in the business to do. And I've often, made this, comment that the auditors don't work here. Okay. Your employees work here. That's who your quality manual is for. You're explaining the quality system to them so that they know what they're doing and can do the right thing and know where they fit in. So, as always, look forward to your comments and discussion, and we'll see you next week.